All right, we're back. We are COMP308 in the winter 2019 semester at Centennial, and we're week 10, part 1 of our broadcast. We're going to be talking about a couple things. Authentication with Angular and JWT we're going to start off with today. I also want to talk about the project and assignment 2, which for some of you here it's going to be different. The project that we're going to be working with is something that Professor Ilya has come up with. However, I'm going to simplify it a great deal because I think it's crazy in terms of the requirements, especially when it comes to microservices and machine learning. So we're going to be talking about that during another video in this segment that we're going to be talking about this today, right? All right, so I want to start off with authentication. We're going to finish off the Angular piece. Again, we've been working, I guess this would be like the 4th week now. We've been working with Angular, we're somewhat struggling at parts and times. Last week I had some challenges with some of the authentication piece. We're going to continue. We're going to start with the project off of GitHub. And again, this is on GitHub right now. If you go to Centennial College on GitHub, if you follow along and you go to lesson 9B, you go to the B team. I'm going to take this lesson here and I'm going to clone it. You guys can download it. Cloning won't work for you because you won't have my access, although you can certainly continue from there. But basically what you can do is if you go to clone or download, you guys would click download. I'm going to click clone. So I'm going to click this, just basically copies my GitHub repo here. And then what I'm going to do is on the desktop, I'm going to go to my command prompt and I'm just going to type in git clone. And then it's going to be the URI that I just downloaded, that is copied, right? So git clone, and that's it. And then what this is going to do, well, actually, this would be bad. So let me just do one more thing. If I did this, it would go in the wrong place. So I'm going to just copy this part. And I really want to go to my desktop, which is something that I really want to do because that's what I've been working with. There we go. And then we can try that. So git clone, and then this is where I want to go. So it's going to clone this whole project on my desktop. All right? That's the first part. So now when I got this, it's going to give me lesson 9B. I'm going to rename this thing from lesson 9B to lesson 10B so we can start today. However, and we've done this in the past, when I bring it into VS Code, and again, I recommend VS Code from what we're doing. Here's lesson 10B. We need to do some renaming, right? So a couple things. Right. One thing is, whenever you bring this in, I want to make another repository. So I'm using control backtick with VS Code, which is going to bring up my terminal window. I've got PowerShell configured as the default shell today. I'm using my PC. Last week I used my Mac. But there's advantages and disadvantages to using both. Some people love Mac, some people love PC. I'm kind of platform agnostic for the most part. I try to be at least. And what I'm going to do here is immediately I've got some, because I downloaded this from GitHub, I have to install, I got to do the npm install portion. There's two pieces. There's one part from my server, which is in the main root, and the other part from my client, which is in the client folder. So I got to do npm install on both parts separately. So again, I'm going to do an npm install, which installs everything on the main folder. It's going to give me my node modules in the main folder. Okay. And then I'm going to kind of go into the client module, the client folder, which is in here, right where Angular lives, and I'm going to do another npm install. Okay, so I got those two things. In a few seconds, you'll have both those. One thing I also got to do is I've got to make some project changes because I moved from lesson 9B to lesson 10B, right? And I usually like to change a couple things in the project just to make sure we're good. So I'm going to go to my package.json file and make sure that it says 10B instead of 9B. Minor things. Again, this is for completeness. It's not required, but I do it because I want to make sure we're on top of, where we're at, just so that it looks okay. There we go. So that's where it's going to be like this. I think I covered most of it. One thing we also had a problem with is up on GitHub. GitHub sometimes gives us this warning that we have a security problem. So when we go up on GitHub in a second, you're going to see we're going to get this. So we're going to correct it. The other thing is that on GitHub, I'm using my .git repo already, the repo that's built into this project. And what I normally like to do is retarget my remote so it goes to my new repo. Right now it's moving on lesson 9B. And so on GitHub, I'd have to make a new repo. So let's do that. Again, I'm just going to click this button and go new repository. So it's going to be I have to put it in the right place. It's got to go on Centennial, and it's going to be called COMP308 W2019, and it's lesson 10B. Last week, for those people who were here, we kind of went over GitHub projects. So if you had a chance to look at that, I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to look at the GitHub project stuff I did last week when I talked about how to use GitHub projects. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I know you guys went through it. I think it's a useful tool, to kind of use with your project that's coming up. Again, my projects are due week 14, the end of semester, and you'll be doing a presentation the last day. It'll replace your final test. Okay, so I want to retarget to this new remote. That's what I'd like to do. So I'm going to kind of copy this remote, this link right here, and I'm going to go into VS Code. I'm going to go Control backtick. Again, this is all my prep work to get this project going. And I'm going to say git remote remove origin. So I'm going to get rid of the origin remote. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Getting rid of the origin remote means that my Git repo is not pointing anywhere right now. And then I'm going to add my new origin remote. So git remote add origin. And I'm going to point to my new remote that I just made, my repo that I just made here, which is this. And then that retargets it repoints my project to the new repo. That's all it does. So then I'm going to just do any other changes I make, like I made some minor changes. I'm going to say that, git add dot, git commits -m, and I'll say something like move to new repo. Just so I know what I'm doing. And then I'm going to git push origin master. These are all the steps I'm just making just to make lesson 10 happen. Okay? And that should be done. So now we have our new branch. And if you look at the master branch here on COMP308 W2019 lesson 10B, you can always follow along from here. You can simply just download this one as we go, or look here if I'm going too fast. And most of the time I go too fast. So that's how it's going to be. So if you have some kind of error that comes up, sometimes we get an error that says, alert, there's some kind of problem with your repository, there's a vulnerability or something, we can correct it. And usually GitHub tells us where the problem is. So what I've found is that the problem is in Bootstrap, in our Bootstrap repo. So if you look at our package.json, if it included Bootstrap, it would be here. I've removed Bootstrap from the backend because we don't need it, as well as Font Awesome, and as well as jQuery. I've taken it away from the backend in this project. But right now it sits in the front end project. So if you look at the front end package.json file, you can see Bootstrap lives in there at 4.3.1. 4.3.1 corrects the problems in the security that we would have up on GitHub that GitHub was complaining about. So anything that's 4.3.1 and later, it kind of patches up that security hole. So we don't have a problem now. So let's get this going. So what I'd like to do in this project, like I did last week, again, Control backtick, is I have these terminals. I'm just going to clear this terminal up. I'm going to have 4 sets of terminals running at the same time, little command prompts, if you will. The first one is going to run nodemon on my local server here. So I'm going to say just nodemon. So I'm going to go back to my root, and I'm going to run nodemon. And again, nodemon is just going to run my server. Now, it's not going to connect because there's no MongoDB database, right? So I'm going to split the window, and I'm going to make a new window here that enables me to run the Mongo shell on this stuff. So I'm going to kind of type in MongoD or Mongod, which is going to run 2017 207 it's going to run on port 27017. And here what I can do is I can restart my server on this side with the RS command, which should connect to Mongo. So now my backend, so that's Express, my Express API is running and it connects to MongoDB. Okay, that's what's happening here. I'm going to go and add another window now. Here's a new window, and this is going to connect to my client side. So usually, like I like to do is run ngserve on this one. So I'm going to kind of go to cd clients, and it's kind of weird. PowerShell has a weird problem running in VS Code. It's a bug that they're going to fix. It kind of doesn't show you the kind of the line once in a while, and that's fine. Just ignore it. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my client and do the same thing. I'm going to run ngserve, and that was one of the commands we used to make sure that Angular is running. What ngserve does is it does a temporary build, like we talked about last week and the week before, that runs on localhost with port 4200. Okay, so again, I'm going to split this window, and any changes I want to make to my Angular application is going to be done in here. I'm just going to do just a clear command, and I can run it in here. Okay, so that's the 4 windows. I have 4 windows, one which is Node and my PowerShell, which is for my MongoDB, which is up here. And this one is for running ngserve and any kind of thing I want to add into this thing over here, my client. All right, cool. So we've got our basic application running. Let's test it. So I'm just going to bring up a window to test my application. I'm going to run this on localhost 4200, and you can see now my application is running. So guys, for people who are visiting, download it. Work with me on this one so you guys can keep on top of stuff. All right? So again, I have my home, about, products, services, all this works. My contact page, I can get a sense of my contact list. I got a couple of contacts in there locally, as well as I can log in and log out. If I log in right now, I can log in as, let's say me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let's say. Here I am, it says I'm logged in successfully. That's great. I've got a bit of a bug here, and we're going to talk about this bug and how to fix it. I can log out. But by the way, if I'm here and I want to know who's logged in, if I refresh the page, it comes up, right? But if I didn't do that for the first time, it shows me this blank. And let me show you this again. So if I log in again, if I log in as me, the current application has a bug. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oops. There you go. And notice it says, now it says welcome Thomas, but before it wouldn't say that. If it was brand new, it would cause me a problem, right? Is that me making all that noise?
No, sorry.
It might be me.
Someone sending messages.
That's good. Black messages are good. All right, so that's, I want to do this, but there's a bit of a problem. Again, if I log out and if I refresh the page, and if I go back to log in, and it knows that I'm logged off. So if I go to, like, again, me, I want to see if I can replicate the problem. Right? It does this. This is a mistake. And if you look at the logs for this, if I go to inspect, and let's take a look at our console, you can see that there's a bunch of errors, right? And we're going to fix this. It says, I don't know what the property of display name is. So why is that? Well, let's take a look at what we're doing to figure this out. So we know that what I've been trying to do is display the name of the person who's logged in and give feedback to the user that they're logged in and who is logged in, right? This is an important piece. But I'm not getting it until I refresh. If I refresh, the name appears nicely. Why is that? Why does that behavior occur? So if I go back to, we know that it's in the client module. Let's do this together. I'm looking in the client module under the source folder where my client lives. Under the source folder, under the app folder, right? I've broken it down into something called partials. In partials, there is a header, and in header, there is this header component.ts, right? Now, when you look at this structure, like, holy crap, it's crazy. I can't believe it. Like, all these folders, they're nuts. It's not nuts. It's just an organization. And if you look at this, we've been working with this over the last little while. It makes sense now, right? One of the things I say is, if you want to learn Angular, you're going to work with Angular, right? There's no other way to do it. It's like when you're doing artwork. I don't know if any one of you are artists, but if you start working on artwork, if you start drawing something, in the beginning, it doesn't look like anything, right? You're kind of looking at it. It's really difficult to work with. And I know some of my artist friends, they always say, it's never good enough until it is. So I kind of feel the same way with Angular. It's never good enough until it is. You got to look at it, you got to work with it, and you kind of get it after a while. And I think one of the things I get about Angular is its structure. So if you look at the structure, it's kind of organized: source, app, partials, header. Inside the header folder, I'm looking at the header component.ts file. And let's analyze this a little bit. So when it loads, it runs ng on init. Here's ng on init. And I declare a new user object. Here's the new user object. And then what I do is I load the stuff up that I've stored on local storage, and I set it inside the user. Okay, cool. And then I got this on logout click, and it's logged in. So when it's logged in, what I wanted to show in my header is the information. But guess what? My is logged in never touches this stuff again. It only happens once on load. So it loads up the page, and initially I'm not logged in. So the stuff that I get from my user object in local storage is nothing. I get nothing, right? And then when I log in and I try and display the user, it shows blank. It shows an error, right? So all I need to do to correct this, and there's a couple ways I can do this, I can just call this in here again, right? So I can do something like this. Now, first, what I'd like to do is use a let statement to say that let's let my result, the one I'm going to return, equal to this part. So I'm going to kind of take this, I'm going to cut it, I'm going to put it over here. Right? This is going to basically say, hey, my result is this object right here. It's going to say that this auth service, which we created an auth service last week, right, and the week before, we're going to detect if I'm logged in or not. It's going to return a Boolean, which is true or false if I'm logged in. I'm going to return this result out. So I'm going to return the result object back out. Okay, so I want to do that for sure. However, it's not just about doing this, right? By the way, it says, I'm getting a bit of an underline. A green underline usually tells me it's a style problem or a refactoring problem. And what it does, it might give you some hints. It says fix identifier result is never reassigned, and it recommends using const instead of let. That's not a wrong thing. Const, again, is a constant. From a style perspective, I think it's just as good as let. In this case, I got a little method, which is never probably going to be used more than once. I could certainly accept this, so it'll change from let to const, and it's not going to affect me in any bad way. All right? Hello. So what I want to do is include this part now. So I'm going to take this part here and copy it and put it in here. And when I do that, let's see what's going to happen. I'm going to check to see if I'm logged in by accessing the logged in service, the auth service. So I'm going to say, is I'm logged in, true or false? Okay, good. I'm going to get that result. And then I want to do this if I'm logged in. So I'm not going to do this every time. I'm going to say if, right, I'm logged in, if my result is green, if I'm positive, I want to be able to do this thing here. So I'm going to, kind of get stuff from local storage. I'm going to put a little if statement in there. The reason why I'm doing the if statement is I don't want to exactly do this every time if I'm not logged in. If the logged in comes in as false, then I don't want to kind of get the information from local storage. I only want to do this when in the event that it's true. Now, if I'm doing that here, I don't have to do that up here anymore, right? Because this happens on init, but I can fill up the data when I need to down here when I check if I'm logged in or not. So this can go away. And I don't want to do any code, replication or duplication. I want to keep it simple. And using the dry principle, do not repeat yourself. We want to try and do that as much as possible, although at times it's difficult. One thing I've vowed to do when I work with you guys is not refactor as I go, because it takes too much time, not because it's not a good practice. Okay, so let's test it and see if this works. So I've saved it, this results. I'm going to go back out to the web, and we see now that I'm getting this. Let's log out. So I'm logged out. I'm going to refresh the page and log back in as me. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if you want to test. And now I'm back, and I can see that there's no error, and it's here for sure, 100%. Okay? So this is a little bug that I wanted to fix with you guys because I saw it last time and I didn't have a chance to correct it, and I wanted to fix it. All right, so we got a little bug, and I fixed it. I'm going to go into my GitHub, and these are the things I changed. I don't know what happened here. This is just Angular documentation. So this is kind of like project stuff. And my package.json definitely changed because I did a couple of other things here, but my header components.ts is the one that I really want to modify. So I'm going to press this plus button, which does the equivalent of git add dot. And here I'm going to do the message. So I'm going to say something like fixed bug in main nav not displaying user or display name is what it is, right? That's what it is. I fixed a bug. and then I'm going to click this little check mark, and then go here and push, and that should, yes, and that should fix my problem. All right, so let's take a look at that. And if I go back out to the web now, and if I look at our repo, you can see now that I have 12 commits, and it says that I fixed my bug. All right, cool. So this is working pretty good, but I have a problem, and this website's not secure, guys. All right? Because look, this is what I can do. I mean, right now I've got log in and log out, but it does nothing. Like it literally does nothing. I mean, I can go to contact and see my little contact list, and if I log out, I can go to my contacts and also see my contact list. And I want to hide my contact list. I want to put it in the secure area, which I asked you guys to do for your assignment number 2, right? So how do I do that? And by the way, for the guys who are visiting, my assignment number 2 is bigger than assignment number 2 that you guys had. My assignment number 1 is bigger as well. So, but there's no assignment 3 and 4. Okay, so let's take a look at this. I want to be able to secure this site, and it starts on the back end. Remember that what we have here in place is there's 2 parts to this application. There's the front end that's served by Angular and the back end that's Express. And in the real world, you might have them separate completely on 2 different servers. You might have the back end on one server and the front end somewhere else, right? Like not literally together, okay? And so when we're connecting to this, we can't use session security. We can't like sit there and go, am I logged in? Remember that HTML has no state information. Doesn't understand if you're what state you're in. It's stateless, which means there's no continuous connection with the server to tell you that you're logged in, right? So because it's stateless, we have to be able to kind of store the security information somewhere. And one of the most common ways of doing it, like we've talked about over the last little while, is something called JWT, using a JSON web token, right? And the web token gets passed to the backend. The backend looks at it and goes, this seems to be the right person. One thing we're going to be doing today is comparing the JSON web token with, if I go to the jwt.io site, it actually gives you some comparisons. It says, hey, look, this is my token, and this is the information that I'm going to have, right? Okay, well, let's look at what ours looks like. Okay, so you can get that information from logged in. Let's log in. And if I go to my username, and if I type in my username, here's my username, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And then I logged in. And if I right click and go inspect, you can look at not just console like we've been looking at before, but also application. If I look at the application folder, you can see that under local storage, under HTTP localhost 4200, I've got my ID token and my user, those 2 things, right? So here's my user information, which is right here. This is the information that I'm saving in my local storage that's coming from when I sign in. That's what happens. And I did this on the back end. I'll show you this in a bit. And I'm also creating a bearer token, which looks like this bearer token right here. Now, I don't need the keyword bearer. I don't need that for my JWT check, but let's copy this whole thing. So I'm going to just kind of copy this whole thing by double clicking or triple clicking there, copy. I'm going to go back to the JSON web token site and then kind of paste it in here like this. And let's just get rid of bearer for a second. And you can see now, here's my username, Thomas, right? And it says my Thomas is example.com. So it's basically what it's done is it's decrypted my bearer token here online. This is what this information does. It basically encrypts your information, your payload. You give it a payload, takes the payload and encrypts it, and then compares it to the information. And it needs 2 pieces, it's almost like you know, 2-factor authentication, what we're using, right? We're authenticating. We're saying, okay, I'm logged in. Okay, cool, I'm logged in. Okay, but make sure that it's you. Make sure that there's nothing that can happen between a middleman attack that happens between the person that's the front end and the server that's the back end. So to prevent a middleman attack, this is one of the ways we can do it. We can use a token like this. There's other ways, and this, by the way, is not the only way or the best way. And again, this is not a security course, but this is something that we need to use to make sure that we have somewhat some kind of security when we're using a front end and back end. All right, so this is good. Now, the reason why it's all red here and it says we can't verify the signature, it's not invalid, is because what JWT and the guys at Auth0, some people call it Auth0, that they prefer is they prefer that your secret, remember that we stored on the backend server, is also encoded, which ours is not. Ours is clear text. So if I click this little button, now you can see that it actually does an example encoding for our secret, and it makes this a valid JWT token. All right, that's what it would be like. So again, we haven't gone all the way and made it completely secure because we're using a clear text secret. Okay, that's what's happening here. But this is a very interesting site. You can confirm that the token you're getting makes sense. If this is not this, it doesn't come up with the information that you put into the payload, something's wrong. All right, so this is how you check it. At the same time, people can use this thing for nefarious reasons, but remember that you know, there's ways of protecting against all this stuff, and I don't have time to go into it with you guys, unfortunately. Okay, great. So this is what we're doing today. So we want to secure our website, but we want to do it in two places, right? So again, we want to secure it on the front end so that you can't go, even if I went to contact, unless you're logged in, you can't even see this part. Okay, that's the first part. And even if you see it, and if you copy the link, going there will take you back to login. We need to be able to guard our route. Okay, I need to be able to do that. And the second part is on the back end. If I was actually sending information directly to the API somehow through Postman or some other you know, application, it's going to deny me unless I'm logged in somehow. I need to be able to be denied in multiple places, right? At the same time, making my app usable. And finally, at the end of today, what I want to do in this for this particular module is make everything work online with Heroku and MLab, right? So that they talk to each other nicely, right? Because there's a problem there too. Heroku is going to look at us and say, well, it's not, there's no localhost 3000, there's no localhost 4200. How do I structure my API? And I got to structure it a little differently, as you'll see. All right, so that's what we're doing today. Let's get to it. We have a lot of work to do. And then in the second half, we'll do kind of an intro to microservices. I'm going to show you a couple of short clips that I won't be able to record, right? But I'll indicate where they're coming from for people who are watching the video. All right, so here we go. Let's do this thing. So first thing first, let's fix the backend. So let's make it so that when you log in, regardless if you're logged in or not, it's going to give you a problem on the backend if you're not correctly logged in. So first of all, we need to correct our backend because our backend, it's got the configuration. And one thing I've asked you guys to do from an assignment 2 perspective is use my code as a base, right? Like, you know, this is, I've already configured it. I spent like, you know, a couple weeks working through it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here, guys. All right, it's okay to kind of use my template as a pattern that you can build upon. Okay, so I'm going to go back to. I'm just going to close all this stuff. I'm going to go back to the server side. I'm going to look inside the config in the app.js file, and notice that I've included passport JWT. I've configured the strategy a little bit here, and on the bottom, if I scroll down, there's an area here that I've actually configured JWT, and I'm using this thing called, this method for a strategy called from auth header as bearer token. It's really long, right? But this is why I need that bearer piece inside of my token. Remember, I took the bearer away when I went to JWT. Well, where do I kind of put the bearer into it, right? So let me explain that. I'm gonna go back to this. And if I right click and I go inspect, and if I look at my application and you look at my token, it says bearer in front of it, right? This. Guess what? This doesn't happen by itself. I had to inject bearer inside there. And I figured this out, I'm sorry to tell you this, by trial and error. I have to figure this out. Try it out, didn't work. Try it out, didn't work. I'm like, where is this coming from? It's kind of sending a bearer, and I don't know how to get this back. And I figured out that you have to kind of inject the keyword bearer, that's my solution to this fix, inside on the public side, on the client side. So if on the client side, if I go to my source folder, in my app folder, in my services folder, inside auth service. So this is the auth service file. If you go scroll down, you can see that right here on line 40, I go, okay, on the local storage, set item called ID token, attach bearer with a space to the front of the token and put it in there, right? That's how I put it in there. So I actually format my token a little bit before I put it in local storage. And that solved my problem, okay? And how did I know that? I used Postman to figure it out. So when I use Postman, right? When I modified my authorization piece, let's use Postman for a second. I'm going to bring Postman up. So you see what I'm talking about? Again, Postman is a free tool you can download to do some of your work in terms of when you don't have you have a backend API, but you don't have a user interface, and you want to test an endpoint, so either a get or post endpoint, you want to test it out, you can use Postman for that. So here's an example of my contact list, and my local API, localhost API is on my contact list. If I click send, right, it should return my contact list, which is Peter Parker and Clark Kent right now, right? A couple of superheroes from different comic book companies. And if you look on the left, I'm using my get because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm getting my contact list. But if you click on authorization here, my authorization is using something called a bearer token, because that's the kind of authorization I want to do with JWT, right? Because that's what I specified here in my app.js. I said I want to use this from auth header as bearer token. That's what I want to use. Well, when I specify that inside of Postman and I say bearer token, and if I just inject my token, there's nothing in front of it, just the token itself. But if I look at the headers that I need to format my headers so they're right? Well, guess what? There's this funny bearer thing in here, right? And I'm like, that's it. That's the problem. That's the thing I've been banging my head on for a goddamn week, right? So I put bearer in front of it and boom, it worked, right? And I figured out when I did some other searching that there's other methods to do that same thing. It worked for me and it's okay, but you can code that thing in different ways to make it work the same way, but it needs bearer in there for this particular mode of, of authentication. So that's what it does. I need to do that. And that's why, going back to my code, that's why I did what I did with my auth service when I injected bearer into the token. So I kind of made that happen. So this is okay. This is okay for authorization. However, we haven't secured the backend. Let's secure the backend right now. So I'm going to go back to, and I did this because, by the way, it's easier to work with everything where things are not secure when you're developing. And then when you're ready to secure it, you lock everything down. And now I'm testing the security aspect of things. You can't test everything at once. I believe it's too difficult. So sometimes you got to do one thing at a time. And if you notice on line 99 of my app.js, I put this little to-do that says protect this, right? To remind me that I got to fix it because I never had a chance to fix it earlier, right? So again, I'm going to go to my config in my app.js on the back end. And one thing that I figured out was how to secure it. By the way, all this information is available online, not just through Googling, believe it or not, but actually in the API documentation that I want to use. So what I want to do here is I can use Passport to help me protect this route. So I can go in here between where my API is for my contact list, because this is what I want to protect on the back end, my contact list, my secure area. And before my contact router, my connection for my contact router, I want to do passport.authenticate. And inside there, what I want to do is I want to put in the type of authentication. I want to use JWT, and I want to specify that in an object that I want to, from a session perspective, I want to set that to false. As long as I can spell session properly, that would be good. Okay. And then I want to put a little comma in there. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of injecting a third parameter, if you will, inside this app use method. So I can have multiple parameters. One of them is this passport authenticate parameter, which blocks the entire section. Okay. So to show that, I'm going to save this. Thank you. To fix this problem, right, to show you this, again, I'm going to go control backtick, and I'm going to go to my node and thing. And now, one thing that for whatever reason, NodeMon today is acting up. It needs to restart. It's almost like it's not watching. So I'm restarting NodeMon. I'm restarting the server on the back end manually. And you can do that with RS for NodeMon. But if I go back to the front end, here's my front end now. And let's just get rid of this for a second. And so I'm authenticated. And if I click contact list, I got nothing. That should be bad. That's not good. Your backend should not crash. So why did I get this? Well, if I right click and if I inspect And if I go to console, I get this error that says, failure to load resource. The server responded with status of 401 unauthorized. So I've locked down my back end. I'm not authorized. I never sent the proper information to the back end to be authorized. And that's why this is coming up blank now. See that? So all I did was add that one line in there, and it blocked me. Now, this is the way you block, if I'm going to go back to the app.js file, this is the way you would block the entire section. But you can also do individual link level blocking. So I want to block one link or one page, not the whole section, right? I can do the same thing. I can just take one of these things here. So I'm going to take this whole line here, and I can go into the router part of my file, and I'm going to do this anyway. I'm going to block both everything that's in the module and individually. And I'll show you this. If I go into the routes, and if I go into my index.js, my contact.js, my routes, what I want to do is I want to use Passport to block each of these routes. So I'm not going to allow you to go into the list or add or edit or anything unless you're authenticated. So just to make further information, I'm just going to do the same command. So Passport, authenticate, JWT, session false for every one of these. So no matter what you do, unless you're logged in properly, right, you can't edit, you can't add, you can't delete, you can't do anything. To block you on the server. This is on the server side, kind of route blocking, okay, or route protection, if you will. That's what this does. And this is using the JWT stuff. Now, again, I don't have to do this. I've blocked this whole section, but I can selectively block or unblock certain parts of my section by taking these things away, and definitely taking this away. If I go back to this part, I can take this away from my app.js here, take this away, and then selectively choose which one of these things I want to block, right? I'm blocking both. I'm doing both things, which is kind of overkill. This section is done. I've done my to-do, so I don't have to do this anymore. And so the back end now is secure. There's nothing else for you guys to do to secure the back end, just this. That's all I left out, right? So the back end is stopping anything from happening. Okay, but now we have to make sure we can communicate with the back end so we can see stuff when somebody's properly logged in. And I left some other stuff out on the contact list side. So let's go back and fix that part. So this is the back end. And what you can do now is, since we've done this and we know we've secured it, I'm going to go to GitHub, and I'm going to make sure that we know that this is what I've done. So I'm going to say something like, I'm adding these two parts to it. I'm going to say secured, Express API, right? That's what I've done. So that you can't go to secure areas, right? Okay, I'm pushing that up. Okay, now that that's secured, I want to make sure that on the front end, I'm just scrolling back out. I'm just going to, again, collapse all these to make it easy. And I'm also going to close all my editors for a second just to make it easy. I'm going to my client, source, app, and I know where the problem is. It's under services. If I go to my services tab, I've got my contact list. Here's my contact list, right? And what's happening is in my auth service, here's my auth service. From an auth service perspective, I register, I authenticate, I store my data, I log in, I log out, all that stuff is good. But however, I let my contact list access the backend, but I never retrieve my token. Here I store my tokens and my information, but there's nowhere that I've retrieved it or compared it or did anything with it. And I need to be able to do that. So again, I'm just going to go back to the front end here. Just one sec. To make sure I want to get this right for you guys. And so when I look at the auth service, I'm just going to make sure that I have everything in place here. And I think I do. I need to go to my contact list service. So let's go to my contact list service here, right? And notice my contact list service already has my user, right? I kind of included it last time, so my user's already there, but user's not going to be used for anything right now, right? It's not being used at all, in fact. And the other thing to notice is I need some way of storing or loading up my authentication token somewhere. So I need an auth token. So I'm going to add that in. So in the top of my contact list service, I'm going to say private, and it's going to be called auth token. You can make your own name if you want. and the auth token is going to be of type any. We don't know what it is. It could be whatever it is. I'm gonna just initialize it to null. Maybe spell private right. How about that? So I've got two things, user and auth token, and they're kind of both initialized right now. Theoretically, the auth token is a string, right? But it could be something else in the future. That's why I've made it any. And again, whenever you use any with TypeScript, you're saying, TypeScript, I don't want to use you. I'm just going to make it, I'm back to JavaScript again when I use any, right? So it's a way of kind of using TypeScript for the best possible use. Now, because we're inside of a service, there is no ng on init. You don't have that in a service. You do have the use of the constructor function, though, and this is where I'm going to initialize my user so that it's not completely blank. So I'm going to go here inside the constructor function and do something like this dot user is equal to a new user object. I'm going to do that, so I'm going to set up a new user object that's empty. Okay, and once I've done that, what I want to do is I want to be able to load the token somehow from the local storage, right? But I have no function to do that for me locally. I'm going to make one. I'm going to go here, and this is going to be a private function. So private, I'm going to call this load token. And all it's going to do for me is it's going to go into local storage and load the token. When I load the token, I also want to be able to set the headers so that the authorization header is set. And what I mean by that, going back to the Postman, is this authorization header, which is of type bearer token, is going to have this set. And in my headers, there's going to be an authorization key that's going to have this value, right? I need to set my headers, because if I don't set my headers, I'm not giving enough information to the back end to tell them that I'm authorized to do this, okay? So here's how it's going to look. First, if I was going to load my token, I'm going to say that const token is equal to my local storage dot get item. I'm getting item from my local storage. We know that it's called ID underscore token, so I'm loading that in. Okay, so that's what that does. So it basically takes my token, my local token, and makes it this. Okay, and then what I can do is I've got it locally here. I've broken it down because I don't have to do it this way. I can directly go to this dot token, which is up here. Notice I made this auth token. I could have just assigned it here. However, if I want to do any kind of troubleshooting before it goes to auth token, I'd want to do it here, and that's why I've kind of broken it down to a separate object. So then I'm going to say that this dot auth token, this is where the waste is equal to token, which I could have done this all in one, right? Instead of splitting it up into two different variables. A bit more memory utilization here as well. Okay, so I'm going to do this, but however, what I want to do is I want to be able to set my headers, right, so that I can use the auth token to update my headers. So I'm going to go down to this .http options. HTTP options is an object that I've created up here that basically controls the header information. Right now, it doesn't include the authorization header, and I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to say HTTP options dot headers is equal to this dot HTTP options dot headers, and don't worry about the syntax. This is just how it works. Set. So I want to set the headers in my HTTP options. I'm going to set it as authorization. You guys spell this right, guys. There is no other way. If you spell it wrong, it'll never work. And I'm going to set it with this dot auth token. Okay, so whenever I load my token, not only do I load it, but I also set it up so that my my headers have been updated. Okay, load token does all this. Now you could split this up. If you don't like that, you could say set authorization token as a separate function or something. But I probably can get away with doing this all at once. All right, cool. So what I want to do here is I want to, before I get list and before I set my HTTP options into the back end, because remember what my contact list does is it connects with my back end through HTTP client, right? And it consumes the API on the back end. But it won't be allowed to do this unless I set the header correctly with the right token. So that's why I have to do this. I have to say load token, right? And once I've done this load token stuff, when I access the getList function, which opens up the information from the backend, it'll load it up. Okay, so that's all I need to do. All I need to do is one time. Save. If I go back to my front end, go back to my front end for a second, you can see now that I can see everything again. Okay, so it's open to me again just by, and by the way, it updated automatically because we're using ngserve. All right, so there we go. Front end, we're good. However, there's a problem. And here's the problem. If I go to edit, yeah, I can access this, but what if I refresh? Meh, there's a problem again. Why? Because if I look at my inspector, you can see that inside of my console, I'm getting this error of 401 again, which is unauthorized. How is it that I'm unauthorized? I gave the information, I might add. Can you tell me why? Why am I unauthorized? If you're watching, you should know, right? Watch carefully. Let's take a look at my backend again. Look, my getList, for my getList method, which gets the information, I loaded my token, which does all this stuff, and it passes the correct header authorization information when I'm doing that. But how come it didn't do it for everything else? Well, because I'm not doing it for any of them. That's why. So when I refresh, right, I'm trying to get my contact in my editor, but I don't have the right information anymore because I've refreshed. Refreshed means I've cleared my header information. So I need to go back and put this here too. This is this.load token. And in fact, I might as well put them everywhere. So just in case I've reset, in one of these cases, I'm going to have the correct information every single time, right? So if I'm authorized, it's going to check me. If I'm not authorized, this is going to fill the authorization bucket with nothing. It's going to be wrong, right? If it's not authorized. But if it's authorized, it's going to let me access everything on the back end. Let's try that out and see if it works now. So if I go back, now you can see that I'm good. It just updated. So again, if I go here, edit, and if I refresh, still authorized, right? We're good to go, okay? So questions around that. So all I've done here is I'm just sending now the proper information to the back end. However, I still got a problem. All I've done right now is I've made it so that if I'm not authorized, I can't access everything on the back end. Example, I log out. And now I go to my contacts. I can still see my contact list, which is wrong, right? And I click contact list and wah, I still see this, but I'm not authorized. So I see this on the back end, I get this error. I never want to have an error like this ever, right? Because this is bad, right? This could crash your system or crash your front end. Who knows what else it can do, right? So I never even want the user to go here if they're not logged in. So let's use some Angular to stop that from happening first. So again, on the front end, this is protected. I've actually protected I've actually sent the information so I can access the back end. But now what I want to do is inside of my pages, I'm going to go to my contacts. So pages, contact, and inside my contact page, it looks like this. I'm getting this container with this something that says secure, and then it's going to be a link to my contact list. Yeah, I never want this thing to appear unless I'm logged in. But I have a problem. I can never tell that I'm logged in my contact component, which means I have to do a little bit of work, right? Because remember, each component in Angular stands alone, right? Unless I tell it otherwise, it's not going to know about any other component, right? So I've got to configure the contact component so that it understands how I authenticate. So going back to this, my TS file, what I want to do here is I want to pass in again, if you notice I have my constructor and I have this active root or activated root, which is my root. I'm just going to add another piece of dependency using the comma here. So I'm going to add another dependency, which is going to be my private auth service. Here's my private auth service. And when I do this, excuse me, it actually did a lot of work for me, but what I really meant to do was this, and then auth service. When I choose auth service, what it does is it installs my auth service right here automatically for me. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to do it by myself. It does it, okay? So I want my auth service. I want a reference to my auth service is what I want to do, okay? So all I'm doing is using my auth service again. I'm saying, hey, I want to check to see if I'm logged in. And the only way I can check to see if I'm logged in is check the auth service. The auth service knows, right? Cool, so that's what I did. Now, in my function, right, I want to have a new little function that's in here in my class called isLoggedIn. IsLoggedIn. Just like I did before. It's going to return a Boolean. And what this is going to do is it's going to say that I want to return this .authService.loggedIn. I want to know if I'm logged in. And if it's true, if it returns true, then it's going to give me a true or false, right? I'm not going to do this directly. I never access the auth service directly in my HTML file, right? That's why I have to have this wrapper. This isLoggedIn function is just a wrapper that wraps my auth service call. So I'm making this call to the auth service, and this just wraps it around. That's why it's called a wrapper. Okay, so then I'm going to go back to my HTML. And what I want to do is I want to use a Angular directive, ngIf. If is logged in, then show me that part. Otherwise, don't. And the way it works is this. So I can go back to here, and I can say, right in the first div, which is the container div, I can say that star ngIf. Look at that nice Angular stuff we just installed. David and I do this today, right? And I can say that ngIf is logged in. Look, it detects my function. That's a beautiful thing. If it's logged in, then show me the container. Otherwise, don't. So if I save that and I go back out to the web, right? And if I'm not logged in, right, then it shouldn't show me that list, this list thing away. Now it still goes to that page. That page is still active. I haven't blocked the page to go there. That's another thing I got to do. So it won't even show me this. But however, if I log in, and if I go to if I log in with the proper username and password, right? So if I put the wrong password, I get that. I haven't typed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I log in, and if I go here, I can see this, right? I see this little link that comes up, yeah. And I go here, and I'm not authorized, right? Somehow I'm not authorized. I'm logged in though. How come I'm not seeing this thing? That's a problem, right? That's a real issue. If I refresh, I see it. But when I wasn't refreshed, I didn't see it. That was weird. I got to check that out. I got to try that out again. I'm going to see if I can fix that bug, right? How is it that I wasn't logged in, right? Anyways, but here, let's suppose I'm logged in and I can see it, and I take this link and I say, David, you know what? Here's the link to my contact list. David doesn't have to be even logged in. He can still try and access it, right? So I take this link, I log out, and I put it back, right? And if I press enter, I can still get there. I can't see anything, but I can still get there. I don't want the users to even be able to get here. I want to redirect them back to the login page, right? And for that, my friends, we need something called a root guard or a route guard. Root, route, tomato, tomato. So how do I do this? So now I've protected my stuff on the back end, and I want to protect my stuff on the front end so that you can't even get there unless you're logged in. Never mind. First, I can't see it. Next, I can't even get there, even if I have the link, right? So how do I do that? So I'm going to use some Angular CLI stuff. So I'm going to press Control backtick. Guys, stop me from going too fast, please. Ask me a question. Pull me down, right? Yes. You can't connect to the internet. You're not directly connected, are you? You're not wired.
No, I'm not wired.
Okay, I'm using wired, so I'm connected. So the way you do it is, sorry, I know this is a problem, but the way you do it is you do this, right? So, yeah, take the wire from the back and plug it in. So the way you do it is you're going to use an Angular CLI command. It's going to be like this. And by the way, if I look at it up online, let's look at it online. So what I want to do is I want to do nggenerate guard. Okay, we're going to talk about this. So guard is actually a Angular command, right? So nggenerates is the way we generate an object, and I can generate all these kind of things. Now things that we haven't talked about. App shell, we haven't talked about that. Application, we do have an application, but we can actually generate it instead of using the ngnew command. If you really wanted to do it from scratch, you could. ngClass, we've done that with a model. ngComponent, we've done that. ngDirective, we have not. You can make your own directive. ng enumeration, we have not. ng guard, we're going to do today. ng interface, library, module, pipe. You can see there's a bunch of stuff we haven't done with Angular, and we can't get to it. We have no time. However, we can do ng guard today. So if ng guard, what it does is it uses something called the can activate interface, right? And we're going to get there in a second. So that's what this does. And we can also use the -- implements to specify which interface to implement, because there are 3 different interfaces we can implement with ng guard, okay? I also want to put it in the guards folder. Maybe I'm going to have more than one kind of route guard in the future. So here's the command, ng generate, so G for generate, guard. It's going to be in the guards folder, and it's going to be called auth, huh? Be in the client. Let's try that again. Thank you. ng generate guard inside the guards folder, and we're going to call it the auth guard, right? So auth is the name of my new guard. It's going to be in the guards folder. We're going to generate a guard. That's the kind of object we're generating with the Angular CLI command, okay? I'm going to press enter. And what it's going to do is it's going to ask me what kind of guard do I want to generate. So space to select, A for all, I to invert selection. So space, I want can activate. This is the one I want. Here, I'll bring it up so you guys can see it. Can activate. Okay, that didn't really do anything. There we go. So I want to do this. I want to do can activate. So I'm saying ng generate guards in the guards folder, auth guard, can activate, and then press enter. And then it creates this guard, and the spec file is really the testing file. We're not going to use that, but it's really nice. Okay, so we're going to go into guards. We're going to look at auth guard, and it's going to give us some base code. So it's going to say, okay, cool. Here's my injectable. It's of type Angular core, right? And I'm also going to get a couple things here. I need a couple things for this guard to work. It's going to say that my auth guard class implements the can activate interface. That's what it does. Can activate needs at least 2 objects. One of them is next and start. However, you can configure this slightly differently, which is what we're going to do. We're going to configure this so that it works how I like it, which is still using the can activate method or activate service, but I'm not going to call this next and state. I'm actually going to call this, I'm just going to wipe this out for now. So where it says can activate, there's a couple things I want to do. This is, by the way, the can activate method, but what I want to do is underneath here, make some space. I'm going to configure this a bit. I'm going to say that my path is going to be activated route snapshot, right? Array, an array of activated route snapshots. I'll explain this in a sec. And then I also want a route, which is also going to be just a regular activated snapshot. Okay. I'm going to make a constructor function because I want to bring in the service that I want. So I want my auth service to come in. So I'm going to call this private auth service. And it's of type auth service, right? Which is going to bring in this auth service that I just wrote, right? The authorization service. And I also want to bring in a reference to router. So I'm going to say that, let's make it on different lines so you guys can see this better. I'm going to say that private router is of type capital R router, which is the Angular router right here, which is going to inject this part. Okay. And of course, I need these curly braces to complete the constructor. All right, so that's what this does. So it creates a dependency injection for both the auth service and the router, the Angular router that comes into my constructor, right? All right, now that I got this, I'm going to change the can activate method, right? The can activate method doesn't need all this stuff. This is extra stuff that I don't need, right? This part. So can activate, it stops here, and it looks like it, okay, well, it's interesting how this works. This is actually the method signature right here, and it takes in a next and a state, However, I don't need to. These are optionals. I don't need to take in a next and a state. I can just ignore these for now, okay? I can do one of those. So can activate can not take those if I don't want them. But it returns either an observable or a URL tree or a promise or a URL tree type or a Boolean and so on, okay? So that's what this does. Well, guess what? I don't need it to do anything but a Boolean. So I'm just going to reduce this down to a Boolean. They're going to be, are you activated? Can I activate it or can I not? Guess what it's going to do in our case. Again, I'm just configuring the route guard. You're going to see how it works in a sec. All right? Don't worry about the syntax yet. And then down here, I'm going to say this. And this is where I use my auth service. If I'm going to say that this .auth service is logged in or logged in, if I'm logged in, then I want to return true, right? I want to kind of say, don't block me, return true. However, if I'm not logged in, in every other case, this .router, I'm going to use the router to navigate away from that page, and I'm going to interfere with what you're doing, right? I'm going to redirect you to the /login page. That's what I'm doing. And I'm also going to return false, just to complete this requirement of Boolean. And that's it. That's the route. That's the router guard. Now there's some grayed out areas here. Okay, these grayed out areas are things that I don't need, so I can remove it. Like I don't need that. I don't need that import, and I don't need these imports. I'm never going to use those, at least in my implementation. And that's my auth guard. You can have more than one guard. Like you don't have to have the same route guard for every kind of route in your service. You don't have to do that. All right, so that's the auth guard. But however, I can never use this thing right now. I can't use it because this is a global thing that I want to use. And when I think about global things, what do I have to change in my Angular project? Does anyone know? If I want to do something globally, where would I change that? Does anyone know? No? Okay. Whenever we think globally, we want to go all the way down to my app module. In my app module, this is where all the global stuff happens, right? Notice that I've included things like my Flash message module and my JWT module. This is global stuff. I've even included my auth service, which isn't being used right now. Maybe I'll use it later. And what I really want to do is I want to use my new auth guard as a provider for my entire application. So I'm going to kind of go in here and say, I want you to use auth guard, right? So here's my auth guard. You got to click the one that has this little symbol. And when you do that, what it does is it includes it here automatically. So I can just go, these are guards, or call them route guards. Oh, only one. But it gets injected down in here. If you don't inject it down in here in your app module, it'll never work. Just, it's a global thing. You need to, like most services, you need to inject them down here. All right? Or in the module, something up here. Okay, so we good? So that's a requirement. Next, so now that I've got it, I've got to modify my routing module. So here's my routing module. So I've got my auth guard, and what I want to do is I want to use the can activate method on each of these 4 routes. So contact list add, edit, and delete. I never want my users going here unless they're logged in. Okay? I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say can activate. You can see that that's an option, right, on my route. And what I'm going to do is in square brackets, I'm going to put in my auth guard, right? So I'm going to say my auth guard, here's my auth guard. I want to be able to activate the service if my auth guard says that I'm good. Or I want to intercept your routing request and redirect you to my login page if you're not authorized, okay? That's how it works. So it's just a little bit of syntax, just like we have path, this, component, this, data, whatever I want, can activate. Well, the only way I can activate this route is if my auth guard says so. Check my auth guard, right? Check if I'm logged in. I'm going to take this little link here. So I'm going to just take the comma all the way to the end. I'm going to copy and paste that multiple times. So for each route. So if I want you not to have access to any of these, then I'm going to just put this little thing here, right? I'm going to check this in a second. I'm going to put it on my home route in a second to show you that if you go home, it's going to say log in, right? In fact, you can put it on everything. If you want your entire site secured, you can put that can activate everywhere. There's also other ways to do it where you activate it on a global level. All right, so this is using, kind of like link-based security, right, on the front end. Let's go back to the front end and see how that works. So I'm going to go back to my client, and you can see that I need to log in. I'm going to log in now. So I'll say, hey, here I am, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm logged in. I say it's welcome. I can see my contact list. I click on contact list. I'm good to go, right? Okay, I copy the link because I want to be sneaky. I want to try and see this list later on. I log out. I go back to the link. I paste it in, and I go and wait. Didn't go anywhere. Not supposed to. Never going to go somewhere. Anything that you require to do here, it's going to redirect you back to login forever, right? This is secured on the front end now. Okay, well, let me prove that. So if I go to home, I can see this. So what if I just want to secure home or about or products? Let's secure about too. Why not? Let's just try it out. So when I go to home and when I click on about, I want to go to login. It'll show me my login page. So again, I can just take this link. I want to secure this page. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to my about, which is this one, my about route, put it in here, save. I want to go back. When it reloads, if I click about, it's going to go back. Nope. I can't even see my about page anymore, right? It just takes me back to login. But if I log in, and if I go through this, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I go back to about, now I can see about too. I'm not prevented from seeing that. All right, so this is route level authentication on the front end, right? So I got authentication on both sides now, on the back end and on the front end. Let's correct that because obviously I want people to go to see my about page, right? I don't want people to be blocked from that, but this is kind of, can I activate a route from on link level? And if you ever want to see that kind of documentation on can activate, so again, if I want to look at, if I say Angular can activate, right? I want to see that information, and it kind of gives you examples of different parameters that are optional. So remember we talked about this route and state, and I took those out, route and state, because I'm not modifying them or using them in any way. This is what the fully formed can activate method, the regular version of it, how it looks. Okay, I've just reduced it. But that's what this does, right? And this can activate method, unfortunately, this is the only example that they have here, which is not great. I would prefer if they gave us some examples of how to make this work. Like, how do I make the can activate method, do different things, right? And if you notice here, it shows you how to from a path level. So here's my router module for route, and this, if you notice, it says can activate this, right? So this is on the ng module for the whole module, right? So I'm looking at if I want to make this whole module available to me, and I can basically say that, well, you know what? The only way you can get to this whole module is if you're logged in. Okay, I want you to think of that. So for my path team, for this path, for the team component, I want to check to see if this is viable, right? And then, of course, like it says here, I need to put my can activate provider in my providers array, right? That's what it does. But you can actually add can activate to an entire section. The entire module can stop it from happening if you don't want to get there as well. Okay. Questions around securing things on the front end with a route guard, right? This is required. If you don't have a route guard, you can't secure your website on the front end, at least not with Angular. All right, let's check and see where the status of our site is. So we have this, and we're able to log in and log out. One thing I noticed, there was a bit of a bug, right? When we logged in, we couldn't see our contact page. So I'm gonna go to my contact page, I click my contact list, and then we're good. But if I refresh sometimes, you get an error. Here we're good. The reason why we got that was because I was looking at a contact. Remember we had that error, and then it kind of persisted, the error, but now it looks like we're good. It doesn't look like that bug is here anymore. Okay, you can see welcome Thomas and everything else, and log out. Again, I won't be able to see the you know, login, that part of my site at all, it doesn't appear. Okay. Let's go back to our application and we say, this is good, right? So we've got kind of like confirmation that this is all working properly. On the front end, let's just collapse all these and collapse all these. And I've got these updates. I added a guard, so I'm gonna say that added route guard for contact list. That's what I did, right? I'm gonna kind of click this button to say git add dot, and this button to say git commit -m, and then the message, and then push. I'm just telling you what the git commands are ahead of time. So we're good, but we're not done. We need to test this thing on by deploying it in the public folder, right? So one way we can do this is to press Control backtick, and I'm going to go into, we've been running this as ngserve, right? Here's my ngserve, right? What I want to do is I want to stop this now, batch job, and I want to build this option, right? So I'm going to say ng build --prod. And what this does, it'll build it for production. And it'll also catch any errors that come off when I'm trying to build my my app. The problem with this is sometimes it'll serve, but when you try to build it, it will fail, right? So it's always good to try it out here as well to make sure that it's working the correct way. Okay? So I'm just waiting for this to finish. And if everything goes well, then we should have a new public folder with a build. There we go. And now I can test it. I'm not serving it anymore. I can test it through the server. And the way the server works is I can just do localhost 3000, which goes in the back end. And you can see now that I'm connected. It also detects that I'm still logged in. I can log out, right? And if I try it out, if I go to contact, I don't see my contacts. If I try and go to contact-list, right, it gives me an error 404 page. If I go to contact/contact-list by typing it in, it'll pull me back to my login page. The auth guard is working. If I log in, I can see everything, including my contact list. So all that's working now on the server level. I need it to work in the server level because when I put this up on Heroku, it's got to live in its own folder, right? So Heroku is going to serve up that index.html file. That's how it's going to work. All right, so it seems like we're all good. However, we're working locally, and I need to connect with MLab, because if I want to work with Heroku, you've got to have some kind of cloud-based MongoDB service. And MLab for now is that service. Now, again, recently, some of you, when you were handing in assignment number 1 and your midterm exam, you had a problem and it said, it's now part of MongoDB. We're going to kind of move this to MongoDB Atlas. So if you never had signed up, like if you had signed up when I told you to sign up in the beginning of the semester, you would never have this problem. But now what's happened is if you want to do this, you have to migrate everything to Mongo Atlas, right? So if you click here and you want to learn about MongoDB Atlas, it's a new service, right? So it says you can, how to migrate early if you want to. There's a way of migrating early. How can I do that? He says Atlas plans are packaged differently than MLabs, and that cluster support backups and data are priced separately. Of course, they're going to price them separately, right? So they're priced a little differently because MongoDB is bought MLab. Should I migrate early? You need to function available in Atlas. That, you know, some common examples of how we make this work. Is there anything you can do to start the backup? You can check your Mongo versions and all this kind of stuff. But basically, that's what it tells you to do. And then you can request a support ticket if you have a problem. So if I want to look at MongoDB Atlas, so I want to say MongoDB Atlas, it looks like this. You can definitely sign in for free, right? And it looks like it's the same kind of situation here. It gives you a link and all that stuff. The problem with MongoDB Atlas and MLab is it just breaks in the school. You can't access it in the school, right? So we're going to have a problem testing it. Now, I can't show you how this would work. Normally, what I would do in the class is I would just connect to my little local hotspot, and then I could continue to, you know, talk about it. But if I do that, then I'm going to drop the broadcast, right? So I don't want to do that. So we're going to assume for a second that there's some functionality, which is a bad thing, because assumptions are always bad, right? But let's do it anyway. So let's suppose you have access to MLab. Again, I'm going to go back to MLab and log in. And again, MongoDB Atlas will be very similar to this. And what I want to do is I want to create a new Mongo deployment. So here's a new Mongo deployment. It's going to ask me, do I want to do Amazon, Google Platform, or Microsoft Azure? Probably none of them, right? I'm doing Heroku, but just choose one. I'm choosing Microsoft Azure in this case. And then I'm going to choose Sandbox, free. I don't want to pay anything, right? So I'm going to choose free Sandbox. And then I'm going to click Continue. I'm going to choose Virginia, which is in the east, close to us, because we're in Toronto. We're going to click Continue. And then I'm going to name the database. Again, COMP308 in the winter 2019 semester. And it's lesson 10B. Hopefully no one ever did that. Thank you. You didn't do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do it. And then I'm going to submit my order. And when it's done, it's going to create a brand new database in here that's online, that's named DS060977 and so on. So this database 10B doesn't have a collection right now or anything. It's completely empty, right? So this would be a good test. My users, in order for me to make this work, I need to establish a database user. So under users, I'm going to click users. I'm going to click add database user. And this is going to give me the ability for me to connect to this database. Again, I'm just going to use my standard user with my standard password we talked about before. And when we test, guys, one thing we can do, you can use my user information and password. And by the way, if it doesn't work, you need to add some kind of symbol. I'm just going to use A in front of this, just to make sure it's A123456. Big deal. Click Create. There's my user, my database user, and we're going to use this credential to log in. And this is the path that we're going to need. So MongoDB / the user, Thomas, colon, the password, A123456, or whatever. And then the URI for my Mongo database. I'm going to copy this whole thing. I'm going to go back to my app. And we're going to migrate now to MLab, right? I'm going to go back to my server under config, under db.js. Notice right now my database is set to MongoDB localhost test. And I want it to go to this new one, which I'm going to put in here. Okay, so I copied the wrong one. Copy. Paste. There we go. And then I'm going to put a comma here. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to comment this one out and uncomment this one. So I'm going to use this one now, this new thing that I got going on. Make sure that I have one of these. I missed that somehow. So I have URI, MongoDB. My user is me. So again, I'm going to just put in Thomas. That's not really my name. And then my database password, which is A123456. All right. So you can see that that's my username and password, and that's how I'm going to connect to MLab. Cool. Well, if I did that, and if I go back to, just to prove to you that it doesn't work, if I go back to my node implementation and press restart, my nodemon, you're going to see now that it's attempting to do it, but because I'm in the school, it's going to fail, and it's going to give me an error. All right, so if you fail here, it's because Google blocks that port to connect it to MLab. However, Heroku will not, right? Because it's cloud to cloud, right? So it's not going to do anything. There is no blocking. You see I'm getting an error now, right? And it says Mongo network error, failed to connect the server, right? But of course, because it's trying to connect on port 60977, look, and 60977, the school IT is like, what is that port? That is a virus waiting to happen. Let's block you, right? Or whatever, an intrusion, something that's going to happen. So they blocked the port. Again, if I was going to go and connect to my hotspot, no problem. All right, so this is cool. So I've done this part, but I want to connect, and I also want to set up Heroku. So the next part is, let's set up Heroku. So I'm going to go up to Heroku. And Heroku.com, again, you have to sign up. I'm going to make a new app on Heroku. And again, I'm gonna make my app name the same, so COMP308-W2019-lesson10B, and press enter. And then what it's gonna do is it's gonna say, how do you want to connect to Heroku? How do you wanna do this? I wanna do it through GitHub, right? I wanna do it through GitHub. Right now, it's going to fail, right? Because my GitHub is pointing to localhost, and I've built everything and I've put everything up on GitHub, but I have the name, right? So my space is going to be, my app that is going to be created is going to be based on the Heroku name, my app name, which is COMP308-W2019-lesson10B.herokuapp.com. That's probably what it's going to be, right? And to prove this to you, if I go back to, if I open my app, it just tells me that, COMP308-W2019, and it says, hey, welcome to your app, but there's nothing here, right? Right now it's empty. So I want to get this address because this, my friends, is my new URI. I cannot use localhost anymore. And just to not waste your time today, because we have a lot to cover, if I go back to our code, there's two places where I use something else, right? So if you notice, if I go back to, and this is on the client side. On the client side, inside of client, inside of source app services for both my auth service, which says, hey, look, I want you to go to this endpoint. This isn't going to work ever, right? So I need to make another endpoint. Call it endpoint, same way, and we'll comment out the other one. And my endpoint is going to be now this, right, /API. That's going to be my new endpoint, my friends, right? Why? Because this endpoint will never work on Heroku, only this one. And you have to be very specific as to the type of endpoint. You just can't put a /API. /API won't work either. You have to put the entire URI. So that's my new endpoint. That's on the auth service. And I'm going to do the same thing for my contact list service. So I go to contact list service, and just like before, I'm going to make a new endpoint. So private endpoint. And now I'm going to put in my new endpoint /API/contact-list, right, /. And that's my new endpoint now. So it's different than this one. I'm just going to comment this one out. Whenever we do local development, we're going to use this one. We're going to use, when we're up live, we're going to use this one, okay? Because that's the one that connects to Heroku. Okay? That's the first thing. So we're going to use this. Is that good? Clear? Yeah, it is. I mean, that's what we have to do, right? So we have to kind of connect to it. All right, cool. So once we've done this, now we have to build. Because we can't put up on GitHub until we're ready, we're built for Heroku. So again, I'm here. I need to go back to control backtick, and I'm going to go to PowerShell. And here where I've built before, I'm going to clear it. I'm going to say ng build --prod and build based on my new configuration. I need to do this, right? Because now what it's going to do is he's going to format all my files. That's going to build out for my new config. And then I'm going to push this to GitHub, connect to Heroku, and if everything goes well, we're done, right? So that's how it's going to work. Yes, yeah, which is what I want to do. So normally I would do another step in here. I would test locally with MLab first to see if I'm connecting with MLab. I can't do that because I'm being blocked by the school ports. So I'm going to do it in one step. Okay, so we're good. Now I want to push this to GitHub. So these are all the changes I made to GitHub for my service. I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to say built for Heroku deployment. Okay, so I'm going to kind of choose all these, check the box, and push it to GitHub. That's going to push my, almost like a build that I'm going to test with Heroku right now when it's ready. All right, back to Heroku. I've got my Heroku app, but guess what? I've not deployed anything to it. It's an empty container. So I'm going to click on GitHub. And after I click on GitHub, I'm going to say in Centennial College. Take care, David. I'm going to choose my repo. It's going to be COMP308-W2019-lesson 10B. I'm going to search for it. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to connect to it. Connection doesn't mean that it's being deployed. I'm just connecting to it. I want to enable auto deploys. So when I change something on GitHub, Heroku will watch and automatically redeploy it back up to Heroku, right? So redeploy the site. So click that. And then here, I'm going to deploy my branch for the first time and manual deploy, right? Because I'm not going to wait. And now you can watch it do it. So it's going to deploy. Here's my build log. You can see that it's installing binaries and everything else on Heroku. It's bootstrapping NPM with the version that I specified. And then dependencies are being installed. Pretty quick, like relative to what you, what you get. And again, this is free service. I think it's great service from Heroku. It's loading output, and we're done, theoretically. Let's see if it works now. View. Okay, looks like we're up. From the front end, looks like it's up. There's my about page, my products, my services, my contact. I can't see my contact. Login, I don't have a user registered, right? Because my mlab should be empty. Let's register our user. This is the whole gamut now. We're going to go through the whole process. Register a new user. We're going to call him Thomas. And the password is going to be 123456. Email. One thing I would love to have is email confirmation, where you confirm the email. Other thing is, another security feature might be to only have an email, not a username. But these are other things. Thomas, register. And if everything goes well, then we're going to get this positive green sign that says we've registered. Cool, now let's log in. So I'm going to say Thomas is going to log into the site, 123456. I'm going to log in. And then we're going to get this green sign that says, hey, you're logged in. Now, if everything goes well, this is the test. When I go contact, I see my contact site. It looks like I'm logged in. I click contact list. I got nothing because we don't have anything. Let's add a couple of contacts in. I'm going to add Peter Parker. How about this? Probably do it right. Peter Parker. He's 21. Huh? What happened? What? Oh, I don't know what happened there. That's like totally, I pressed a button or something. I don't know. Add contact. Yay, that works. That's great. That's live on mlab, right? And then I'll add another one. Let's add in Clark Kent. I like those guys. He's a 45-year-old dude. And I'm going to add another contact, Tony Stark, all over the place with superheroes, right? Tony Stark. But I spelled his name wrong, Starks, and his age is 489, right? And I'm going to kind of add the contact in. Got to edit that one, right? So I'm going to click edit. He's good. I'm going to refresh so I see if he's still connected. That's good. These are all checks I'm doing to make sure that I'm connected, right? And I'm going to click cancel, which takes me back here. I'm going to edit again, and then just choose 48, modify his name to Stark, and click edit contact, right? That looks good. You know what? I decided I don't like him. Let's delete him. I'm going to cancel that. I don't want to delete him. Well, maybe I do. All right. There we go. So he's gone. So now I've done the whole kind of checks. I've added, removed, edited, deleted, everything. I'm trying to check my site, right? It looks, guys, like we're up. And if you want to, please check too. Go to COMP308. I'm just going to take this thing and put it up on our Slack channel so you can check it if you're part of Slack, our Slack channel. I'm going to go to Slack. And I'm going to just populate this page here so you can check it yourself. Okay. There's my contact list. Now here's something. It went to contact list. This should give you takes you to the login page. If you go here to check this out, if you actually click on this, it should take you right to the login page because you're not logged in. You shouldn't be able to have access to it. Yeah. mlab. Yeah. No, with mlab. Yeah. I did that in the other step. So I can't do it here locally because locally I can't test with mlab because it blocks my ports. But however, I configured it properly. So online, what's happening is I have mlab here. So if you want to look at mlab, if I refresh, you can see now that I should have in my collections, I have two collections, first and users. My first collection has 2 users, 2 objects, Peter Parker and Clark Kent. You can see that there, right? And you can also see that I have a users collection, which I only have one person, Thomas, right? That's the collection. You can see it right on mlab, right? These are all the data. Okay, so that is project complete. All right, so everything that's working now up online. I've pushed everything to GitHub, so we're good to go. So if you look at our repo, everything that we've done for Angular is up. Okay, I'm going to take a short break in a second, but what I want to do now is I want to go over the assignment one more time. Anyone have any questions before we move on? Okay, so again, the real key here is that we secured the website before it wasn't, and we use this new URI to connect to Heroku and MLab. This has to be specifically like this. You cannot put in a short form like that doesn't include this part. You need to include that part. The way I've configured JWT, okay? Let's just close this off, and we'll close these off, and the project is pretty much done. So I want to talk about the assignment. I've got an assignment for you guys for our section. We have an assignment 2. And last week I put up the document a little later than I wanted. I thought it was up, but it wasn't. It wasn't up somehow. So if I go back to, let's just log off and log back in. If I go back to that, so let's go back to log in. On our learning system here. So we're going to go to here, and I want to look at our assessments, so our assignments. And if you look at assignment 2, where I have our mean portfolio stack, you can see that inside there is a link to the PDF file, meanportfolio.pdf, right? So if I download this thing, and I already have it, but I'm just going to download it again. So you see it? Then you can see what it looks like. So really, this is due next week. You guys have a week to do this. Now, I'm guessing, maybe I'm wrong, but none of you have started. I'm just guessing, right? Am I right? Yeah. So it's not as difficult as it seems. Now, here's my flag. This is I usually see 100, when I have 104 points, that's like a head scratcher. That's a lot, right? So why is this a lot? Normally what I do is I look at, for me, when I format my assignments, I go, okay, it's 15%. I look at it like this. Maximum that you should be able to work on this thing is 15 hours, max. If it was like a crazy brand new assignment that you never saw before. So I usually try and kind of balance and say like 1% is about an hour's work. Max, right? This is nowhere near an hour's work for a 1% because everything that I've done here with you guys, you can use a lot of my template or my code as a backend just to scaffold out your own application. So what you're doing here is you're taking your mean portfolio set from assignment 1 and migrating it into, your express portfolio, migrating into the mean stack, right? And to do that, you're going to create an Angular front end and kind of migrate your express backend just like we've done so far. That's all I want you guys to do. If you follow the videos over the last 4 weeks, you can follow the videos and it'll work for you, for your site. Okay, that's what I want you to do. Hell, worst case scenario, just take my last code for 10B, modify it, and add your front end, and you're good to go, right? I'm not joking. This is what I want you guys to do, right? So the first part, which is the migration part for the back end, is worth 28 marks. But it basically tells you what to do, how to restructure your app step by step. One of the things that's different about the new app that you're making compared to the portfolio that you made for assignment 1 is this part, which says, hey, I want you to make a secure area of your site, so D and E, right, that has a shopping list, a to-do list, a contact list, some kind of list. You name it, whatever is reasonable. Please don't make it less than this, but you need to perform full CRUD. That's create, read, update, and delete functionality. So if you want to add some other kind of list, my favorites list as an example, as another option, or something else, you can certainly do that here. Guys, thank you so much for coming today. If you want to take off, you can take off. If you want to stay, you can stay too. So it's up to you. So this is what you want to do. You want to do this full CRUD stuff on any one of the lists that you include, right? And what I need you to do is you have to create an appropriate model class for this. So if you're making, for example, a shopping list, maybe you're going to make an item class. If you're making a to-do list, you're going to make a to-do class for it, right? And if you make a contact list, you copy my contact list, I'll put it that way, then you'll use the same contact class that we've made before, right? And most of you are going to do this, guaranteed. You're just going to take my contact list and just make it work within your app. That's fine. I'm okay with that. For me, it's all around integration and assimilate. You're going to assimilate the code we've made work, and you're just going to make it work with your new portfolio site. If you do that, then you'll get full marks. I'm not going to, mince words. So it looks like a lot of work, and there's a lot of details here to remind you all the things. So please check box everything that you're going to do. Notice that there's just more stuff around things that we've already done. These are all the things we did to make our app. So this part is worth 28. The next part is worth more. It's worth 34 marks in terms of site structure. That's like scaffolding, right? And 28 marks functionality, right? So the way this works is you're going to use ngnew to generate a new basic Angular. This is assuming that you're going to make a brand new project. If you wanted to do this, this is a step-by-step to make a brand new project. What to install in your backend, how to generate each component, and so on. It tells you what to do. Now, you don't have to follow this completely as long as you take my project and modify it to your ends. It's kind of satisfies requirements, right? So I'm not going to force you to do all this stuff, but this is a step-by-step to help you do it if you wanted it, okay? And then you've got this part. Please don't forget the internal documentation piece, which I'm looking for. People didn't include this in their assignment number 1, which I've looked at extensively, and you've lost like 2 or 3 easy marks right here by not putting your name on the file. You need to put your name, follow the instructions, guys. People aren't doing that. You'll see I'm pretty generous with my marks. I don't try and do crazy stuff and give you zeros unless you don't hand something in. If you don't hand in your assignment number 1, like if you haven't done that, I mean, it's pretty late, right? We're at week 10, right? So nothing I can do for you at this point. But you need it. You need some kind of portfolio information content for assignment 2, right? So I don't know what you're going to do because both those assignments were 30% of your grade, right? So you need to do that. So you need to do this. Then GitHub is required, and so is cloud hosting, and I recommend Heroku because I just showed you how to do it. Do Heroku, man. Don't try and do like Azure or Amazon Web Services or Google. That's crazy. Why would you do that? That's more work for you because you can do it, but it's just you have to figure it out. I'm not showing you how to do that, okay? I would have shown you Azure, actually, if the student pass was a little easier to use because in past years, I used to like Azure a lot. But they started to block it here at the school, number 1, and also our E5 on the hub changed a lot when it comes to Microsoft Azure and access to Azure. I don't know if you noticed that. Like if you actually go there and try and download Microsoft apps, it's a totally different process now. It doesn't even look the same, right? So that's kind of a block in terms of our progress when it comes to Azure, or else I would have shown you that. So that's how it looks in terms of our total code. I think it's like right. I think I may have given you an extra mark there for this. It looks like 104 or 103 points. And that's where the marks come from. So if I go back to this, so this is due again week 11, which is next week, March 30th at midnight, okay? It's not a lot of work, but you need to get cracking on it, right? Which means take the stuff that I gave you today. Today kind of solidifies everything you need to finish your assignment number 2. Get it done, okay? And then you'll have a mean stack app that you can say that you worked on, right? You worked on a mean stack app, you go to an interview, you did it. You worked on Angular, and you can probably with confidence talk about how to do routing, how to do a route guard, all those kind of things. The things we haven't covered are the things you should look at, and I recommend, again, using lynda.com as a, we're going to look at Docker later on, as a backup. If I look at, Angular Essential Training on lynda.com, right? If you go here, there is an Angular Essential Training course and a bunch of other Angular courses here on lynda.com, which I think is fantastic as additional material. I think it's nothing wrong with this. And again, I've asked you guys in the past to look here, and I still recommend it's probably a good resource to look at as an additional resource to bolster your information. So again, Angular Essential Training is not bad. It talks about the architecture overview, how to do data binding, how to do routing, and Justin Schwarzenberger, he's pretty good in terms of the way he talks. He's pretty quick though, as a trainer, so you have to follow along. You may have to stop and start the video several times. One thing we didn't have a chance to cover too much is directives and pipes. We covered a couple of them. We covered ng-for and ng-if, those 2 directives. Those are pretty important. But there's a lot of different kinds of things that you can do with directives. You can also make your own custom directive, and it talks about how to do that, your own custom directive, which is your own custom attribute. right, that you can build into your code. There's also Angular forms. It talks about that. We really didn't go into this at all, how to do this, and how to do forms and templates and all that stuff. Services we did cover quite a bit, and especially the HTTP client that connects to the backend. We talked about that, and he goes into detail about how to do CRUD with Angular, and he uses a mock service, a mock backend, instead of actually having an API. So kind of a really good rounded course, originally released in 2016 with, I believe, Angular 2, and now updated with Angular 7 or Angular 6 last year in March, right? So again, we're sitting at Angular 7. Routing is, again, really, really important to understand how to do, and I think we covered most of it in our course. Okay, so our Angular component's done. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to start off on microservices. Okay, questions before we stop? Great, guys. We'll see you back in about 15, 20 minutes. Okay.